Okay. Thank you all for coming. Happy to see such a turnout this afternoon. I'm Amar Khalid. I'm the editor-in-chief for SAIS Perspectives this year. And I welcome you all to our annual launch event and photo exhibition. Let me begin by first sort of introducing SAIS Perspectives. We are the official sort of publication, student-run publication of the International Development Program at SAIS. Each year we publish around a particular theme. So last year this was technology and development. This year I'm excited to announce that we'll be focusing on development for all as our theme. And I encourage all of you, current students, faculty, alumni, to submit your materials to us. See this as an opportunity to have your sort of voice heard. It always helps to have a written sort of writing sample to submit with your jobs and internship applications. And so yeah, do submit. I'll go over the details of submissions a little later. And also we hosted a photo contest earlier. I think most of you are aware. And so before sort of we unveil the winning photographs, I'd like to call upon Professor Dornseif, who's sort of senior advisor for the International Development Program, also a senior fellow with the Foreign Policy Institute at SAIS, to please introduce our very special guest today. Thank you.
Thank you, Amar, and congratulations to all of the editors of SAIS Perspectives. It's really fantastic to see all of you here today. I'm delighted to welcome back our guest speaker. She was a guest lecturer in my class on international financial institutions just last week. Fei Yu is the deputy representative of the Asian Development Bank's North American office. The North American office of the Asian Development Bank represents all of the bank's affairs in the United States and Canada. And as such, she has relationships developed with our business community, our academic community, our advocacy community, our representative body up on Capitol Hill, and all the executive branches, as well as the similar responsibilities in Canada. So that's a really big job. But prior to coming here to represent the ADB in North America, our speaker was the leader of the ADB People's Republic of China Knowledge Sharing Initiative based in the PRC office in Beijing, China. And prior to that, she was based in Manila, where she led project preparation teams and managed investment assistance in environment, natural resources, and the agriculture sector. So as we look around at some of these photos, we see a lot of familiar topics for our speaker. And she's also an accomplished academic. So prior to joining the ADB, she was an assistant professor of economics at Colby College and a visiting assistant professor of economics at Mount Holyoke College. Dr. Yu is a PhD graduate of one of our sister institutions, the Harvard Kennedy School, and I am pleased to introduce her today to talk with us about her prior experiences and our development theme. So, Fei.
Thank you, Cinnamon, for the very nice introduction.
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here today, as this issue that you are focusing on today, it's very important. It's at the heart of ADB and other MDB, multilateral development banks operations, because ultimately this is the quality of life is what we care about. But I would say that all of us are students of this very complex issue, myself included, and everybody else who works in international development. I will start with a very brief review of ADB's historical role in poverty reduction, which will be discussed in the context of the economic and social development of the Asian Pacific region. I will do a very brief historical review, so I hope you're not bored with this. You probably all know about it already. So 50 years ago, ADB was incorporated with a charter to foster economic growth and cooperation in the Asia and Pacific region. 31 countries signed the articles of the founding charter, 18 of which were in dire need of assistance. So the ADB was established at a time of difficulty for the Asia-Pacific region. It was not a promising region like it is today. At the time, it was really in great hardship. So over the next half century, the region experienced astonishing transformation, underpinned mostly by major economic reforms. And this is achieved through sustained economic growth, which is nurtured by gradually improving infrastructure, realignment of policy frameworks, enabling trade and investment, sounder fiscal and monetary arrangement, advances in education, health, and other social infrastructure, and greater security and political stability. So if we review the countries, several countries led the transformation. So first, Japan. So Japan was the most advanced countries in the country in Asia, and it was followed by the Four Tigers, which you probably already know, which Hong Kong, China, Republic of Korea, Singapore, and Taipei, China. So these are the traditional Four Tigers of Asia. As living standards improved in these countries, their competitive position in low-wage industry eroded. So the other countries were able to climb the ladder, including Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and others. They picked up on these opportunities and moved from low to middle income status. So more spectacularly, since the late 1970s, China has advanced in quite an extraordinary manner, with economic growth rates exceeding 10% annually for 30 years, which is quite a miracle. So resulting in lifting the country from low to upper middle income status and the goal of moving further up the ladder. India is the next one on the move, as is Vietnam and most other countries in Asia and the Pacific region. From 1990 to 2010, the average annual economic growth rate for developing Asia was 7%. So imagine the growth rate this year for the United States is 3%, and everybody is celebrating. So that's very extraordinary. For 20 years, the economic growth rate for developing Asia was 7%, double or triple that in other developing areas of the world. Some 700 million people in Asia were lifted out of poverty, and life expectancy increased sharply. So when ADB was established, life expectancy was about 50 years in Asia. And today, it's well over 70 years on average. So in some countries, higher than others. So ADB, during this process, ADB had been a strong partner for its developing member countries. In the early stages of ADB's operations, with very limited initial capitalization and human resources, the focus was on agriculture and infrastructure. The focus on agriculture is really prompted by widespread food scarcity in the region. So a lot of countries are still struggling with food security. Some of the countries are still have this problem today. But this was a widespread, very serious problem at the time. So our operations mostly focused on agriculture and infrastructure in terms of their industry, transport, energy infrastructure. These are the sectors that are beyond the capacity of a lot of developing countries 50 years ago. They just did not have the capacity, the finance to do these things. So gradually, the ADB expanded into other areas over time. Nowadays, we offer our developing member countries access to a wide range of loans and grants, as well as equity investment and bank guarantees. So last year, ADB's operations investments amounted to 17.5 billion. So, but money is not the only issue here. Equally important is ADB's involvement in policy dialogue with the developing member countries. So these policy dialogue are very intensive, very extensive and intensive. So we have what's called a country partnership strategy development with every developing member country where we operate in. So during this country partnership strategy policy dialogue, we would discuss overall improvement of economic management and specific sector issues, and most importantly, pushing reforms that would improve prospects for economic development. So But despite ADB's success in marshaling human and capital resources in support of its developing member countries, we need to acknowledge that ADB's footprint is still small compared to the overall scale of things in the region. So ADB's investment accounts for less than 1% of the GDP of every member country that we operated in. So we're a very small part of the bigger picture. And the task of reducing remaining poverty in the region still remains daunting. More than 500 million people continue to live in absolute poverty, living on or less than $1.25 a day. And this $1.25 standard, it's a common standard for a poverty line, but there are a lot of people who are in a very vulnerable position. So they are technically living above $1.25, but they could easily slip in under the poverty line if there's a negative shock in terms of family income, natural disasters, or health problems. So we have widening inequality in the region, and this is clouding the remarkable progress in reducing poverty in the region and has so to give you some examples, the Gini coefficient, which you probably covered in your coursework, which is a measurement of inequality from 0 to 1 or 100. So for China, the Gini coefficient for per capita consumption worsened from about 32 in 1990 to about 43 in 2008. So 32 to 43. This is a very significant increase in inequality. And that's over less than 20 years' time. So in India, the Gini coefficient was 32 in 1993, and in 2010 it rose to 37. So slightly a more modest increase in terms of India, but China was a very big increase. In Indonesia, the Gini coefficient worsened from 29 in 1990 to 39 in 2011. So this gives you an example of what the overall picture of income inequality in the region. So as rising income inequality is becoming increasingly acute and divisive, governments across the region have begun to accord a higher priority to promoting inclusive growth. The cause for concern is more than just the social injustice of rising inequality. Of course, we don't like social injustice. That's a matter of, that's a moral issue in addition to other issues. But the studies undertaken by the ADB Research Department have concluded that rising income inequality from the mid-90s to the mid-2000s in the 3 countries that I cited earlier hampered poverty reduction by as much as 10 percentage points. So this has a huge impact on poverty, in addition to just being a morally wrong issue of having inequality. So for example, if China's poverty rate would have fallen to 5% instead of 13% if there weren't an dramatic increase in income inequality. And for Indonesia, the poverty rate would have fallen to 6% instead of 16%. And for India, the poverty rate is still some 33%, but would have fallen to about 30% had income inequality not intensified during this period of time. So another economic consequence of income inequality is that growth itself is slowed down by rising inequality. Low-income families are unable to invest in human capital, so including education, health. So besides being people, they are also very useful and productive inputs to the economy. And so this basically degrades your human resources that's available for economic development. So small enterprises, despite proven high rates of return, have difficulty in accessing capital. This is another missed chance for development. The middle income class is hollowed out, increasing the risk of conflict and social instability. So in Asia, the economic growth was spectacular, but very largely due to the stability in the region. The region had been very stable, mostly. So further, the quality of institutions may have debased, exacerbating corruption and other social ills. In response to these developments, the political response may be short-term measures at the expense of long-term policies, better attuned to efficiency and stronger growth. So in recognition of these pressures, the governments of China, India, and Indonesia, and many other countries in Asia and the Pacific have formulated development plans emphasizing inclusive growth. So what does it mean specifically for, in terms of policy measures to promote inclusive growth? The measures differ by country, depending on the country's individual circumstances. But the three sets of policy measures that are quite common. So one is fiscal policy measures. So these are just these are basically transfers from the central government in terms of resources to area, in terms of spending on education and health, targeted social protection programs, and progressive tax instruments. Another area is support for lagging regions. So the central government would shift considerable resources to areas that are considered to be backward and underdeveloped through either improved regional connectivity, establishment of growth centers, and also to facilitate movement of human resources to these regions. So the third area is employment-friendly growth. So these are mostly achieved through supporting small and medium-sized enterprises, strengthening labor institutions, and reducing policies that favor capital use over labor. So three sets of broad policy directions, basically involving transferring resources in society to areas, to populations that are disadvantaged. So these measures address both inequality of income and inequality of opportunity in terms of health, education, and other social services. So differences in access to education and health services obviously bear importantly upon future income and ultimately the degree of social income inequality. So for ADB, we endeavor to address both aspects of inequality. Our long-term strategic framework, 2008 to 2020, recognizes that investments in social protection help reduce poverty, inequality, and vulnerability. ADB has dedicated considerable resources to advancing social assistance, social insurance, and labor market programs. Between 1996 and 2010, ADB's loans and grants on social protection amounted to more than $3.3 billion. Our inclusive growth strategy is premised on maintaining high sustainable growth, expanding access to economic opportunities, and providing adequate social protection. ADB's policies and programs include initiatives to enhance the functioning of labor markets, diminish people's exposure to risks, and enhance their capacity to protect themselves against hazards and the interruption or loss of income. All ADB loans, grants, and technical assistance are evaluated with this perspective as a priority. So as an example, just to see what we do in real life, so ADB is providing $400 million loan to the government of the Philippines to expand its flagship conditional cash transfer program. So this program provides regular health and education grants to millions of the country's poorest households. the support has been extended to high school students, keeping vulnerable young people at school and opening the door to a better future. Some 4.4 million people have been beneficiaries of the CCT program, which started in 2010. So this is a specific example of what we do to promote better access for the disadvantaged populations and groups. We have also just completed what's called the Social Protection Operational Plan. This is to guide all our operations. And this plan calls for the integration of social protection into education, finance, health, and other projects, support for capacity building and knowledge sharing and South-South cooperation in terms of social protection. So there's much more that I would like to share with everybody here, but because time is short, so I will conclude here. Let's discuss while admiring these various beautiful pictures that you have traveled all over the world to gather today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So now it's my great honor to announce the winners of this year's photo competition. In fifth place, we have a beautiful photo by Alexis Chapman of Intore dancers in Rwanda. And I think Alexis is here to give us a bit of a talk about how she took the photo and a bit more detail.
Hi, my name is Alexis Chapman. This photo is from northern Rwanda in Musanze, and it's the Intore dancers, which are the traditional dancers, or the traditional dance in Rwanda. There's 3 parts of it. So the women back here do the ballet, then there's the drumming, and then the men in front wear wigs and have spears. And it was traditionally, when they came back from war, this was their victorious dance. And it is in front of the Virunga mountain range. And this is Mount Sabinyo, which in Kinyarwanda means tooth because it looks like an old man's tooth. And the Virunga mountain range is, I'm trying to remember the exact, but it's half of the biodiversity in sub-Saharan Africa are in this mountain range. And this mountain range and Bwindi National Forest, which is in Uganda right next to it, are the only 2 places left where there are mountain gorillas in their natural habitat.
Thank you so much, Alexis. In fourth place, we've got a beautiful photo by Brenna Buckstaff of chairs in Wadi Rum in Jordan. You'll notice that Brenna also had another winning photo over there of Wadi Rum in Jordan. Moving on, in third place, we have a photo by a Bologna photographer, Danny Lee. Danny Lee took this photographer of a street cobbler in Bangkok. He said that when he got in conversation with him, he found that he was 70 years old and wanted to retire but couldn't because he needed to support his family, which made him raise a lot of questions about social care and the welfare state in Southeast Asia. In second place, we have a photo by Aditya Baljandra. Happiness is hard work, and I think Aditya's here to give us some details about the photo. Thanks, Aditya.
Hi all. I took this photo in the streets of Haridwar. Basically, he had a philosophy that happiness is hard work. I mean, he was 79 years old. I think so. Yeah, 79-year-olds, and he's been selling this sweets and peanuts on the streets since last 40 years. The irony is that he's a well-settled man, but he still continued his business because he didn't have formal education, so he was not into formal economy and stuff. So this was a means by which he's earned his life and settled his family. He made sure that his children are educated, are well educated, are in, I think so they were in government services. The earnings from this business goes to the girls' education charity trust. So in this way, he's contributing back to the society. Still working hard at. I mean, it's like 2 years ago. So it's 80s now. He's in 80s. So hard work is what it is. So it leads to a success, and that is what it is. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya. And in first place, we have a photo by another Bologna photographer, Samuel Reynolds. When he was traveling in Papua New Guinea, he was traveling in the northernmost point of New Ireland. He said he was overwhelmed by the friendliness and the hospitality of the locals, meaning he never had to stay in a hotel one night in his whole trip. He just moved from host family to host family. And this is a photo of some of the host children that he stayed with. So. In conclusion, I would just like to thank you all for coming. I would like to thank our wonderful photographers. This year, we really struggled to choose a winning photo, like lots of debate. And thank you to our wonderful speaker and to Professor Dornsey for the introduction. And please enjoy the rest of the event, guys.